Joined alongside Chris Lemmo as per usual here. Took a week off this past week, so we have a lot to dissect in the world of baseball here, trying to make up for 2 weeks of content here. And this won't even be the last time we're going to record for this episode. That'll be finished tomorrow. We'll get to that later on. But Chris, how you doing today?
You know, Logan, I've been better. This podcast is the single-handedly the thing that keeps me going through the week. It's been, I left Binghamton on Sunday, and it's been a rough one. Came back, saw my Sixers collapse in Game 7, which I should have expected from Philly sports, and then I had a day off on Monday, which was cool. Tuesday, got to watch the Phillies get embarrassed on a national stage and then do the same thing again on Wednesday. So it's been, and then we had a leak in our house when we came back on Wednesday, and the ceiling, the drywall, some of it came down in the kitchen. So, it's been a rough week.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of watched part of that Sixers game, and got to say, Ben Simmons, he's a great defensive player, great passer, great rebounder, just can't score. And, it's tough to see from a first overall pick, but it's going to be an interesting offseason with him. Doc Rivers has a history of blowing playoff leads. Do they stick with Ben Simmons? But definitely tough loss to the Hawks. I mean, we kind of wore our NBA jerseys a couple weeks ago on one of these pods, but should be a fun offseason for the Sixers. And as for me, aside from the 8-0 Islanders loss to the Lightning at the start of the week, it's been a pretty even sports week. I mean, the Islanders have a Game 7 on Friday, and the Mets have kind of been on and off this week. They've kind of been like 500, around 500 this week, playing mostly the division team. So they've had a relatively balanced week aside from the injuries, but we'll talk about that later on. But a lot to get to. I mentioned we have 2 weeks of content to make up for. And the big story around the major leagues, and we talked about it on the last episode, is the foreign substances issue around the MLB. And recently, there was a ruling decided that umpires would now have permission to check all pitchers whenever they wanted, just for these foreign substances. They can check after innings, they can check during the inning. That was a rule that was there before, but it's kind of been ramped up due to the recent rumors around foreign substances around some of these star pitchers of the game. And it's kind of gotten some mixed reactions. You have pitchers like Max Scherzer and Sergio Romo who just aren't happy every time they get checked by an umpire. Then a guy like Jacob deGrom who just laughs it off and just kind of handles it like it's nothing. So, Chris, what are your overall reactions? What is your stance on umpires checking these pitchers?
I have to say, I think it's a good thing. I mean, look, my reaction to the whole, because I guess we'll get into the Girardi thing after this, but my thinking is that I don't think it delays the game to check between innings. I think it's completely fine, and in fact, I think they should do it. Now, it's interesting the way that the views have evolved, because it seems like now, I've seen a lot of the reaction from the general public. People are like, "Oh, they should be allowed to use the sticky stuff," and now people are like against them checking. So it's like, what are you like? You can't have it both ways, okay? If they're going to enforce the rule against the sticky stuff, they're going to have to check. Like, it is what it is. Maybe it costs you a couple minutes on the game, but it might be overall better for the integrity of the game at the end of the day. So, look, I'm not the kind of person that's going to tell you that I don't have a problem with games going on a couple of minutes longer because they're checking, to make sure that nobody's cheating. I don't have a problem with that. Maybe some people do. Now, the thing that I will get into, though, is I do think that between this season and next, Major League Baseball, which I believe owns a stake in the company that makes the baseballs, which I believe is Rawlings. If I'm not, I might be wrong on that, but they need to work to make a better baseball that can be gripped, like without having to use stuff. Like it shouldn't be one or the other that the pitchers either can't grip the ball and are throwing at people or have this amazing control over the ball that they're getting the spin rate up to like historically high levels. They should be able to in the year 2020 create a baseball that gives pitchers enough grip to control the ball, but not obscenely sticky.
Yeah, and I agree with a lot of the points you made there. I don't think it delays the game when a pitcher walks off at the end of an inning or at the end of an appearance. Then the umpire just does like a casual check before they go back in the dugout. I think it causes more of a delay if the pitcher makes a big scene out of it. Like we've seen with guys like Sergio Romo just pulls his pants like somewhat down, just like kind of mocking the umpire in a way. And then Max Scherzer's kind of hinting like he was kind of like taking a lot of stuff off, just kind of like saying, "Hey, what do you want to check for me? I'm clean." And that was another thing. None of these guys have actually gotten caught, and there have been a lot of rumors that these pitchers are using sticky stuff. But we've been well into a week, I think, of this rule being kind of in place, and really there have been no major reports of anyone getting caught or taken out of a game because an umpire actually found this stuff on these pitchers. Now there was the case of Tyler Glasnow, who had to change up his entire approach because he did use something like that. And then the first start he did need a torn UCL. He's going to be out for a while, but he was never caught in game. We haven't really seen an umpire actually catch someone with something on them like that this season, or at least as far as I know. So that's the big thing that I'm taking. But it really just depends on how the pitchers take it. There are a lot of different personalities in the league. Like Trevor Bauer, obviously a big personality. I don't really think he even had a big problem with it yesterday when he played the Padres, even though he hinted like he could possibly do something on his Twitter. But it really just depends on the guy. I mentioned Jacob DeGrom. He was just smiling because he knows he's 100% like a human. He's not anything more. He's not using anything more. So it really just depends on the pitcher. And there are a lot more other rules that slow the game down, like rulings that shouldn't take as long as they do, umpire reviews that shouldn't take as long as they do. That takes way longer than just a simple check on the way to the dugout. Now, I think the main problem is just doing too many checks. I think that was the whole Joe Girardi national situation. I know you have a lot more to say on that, Chris. You've kind of been going off on that a few times this past week, but I think too much is going to be bad. But once the inning is over, once an appearance is over, I have no problems with it.
Yeah, I agree. I think the between innings stuff is probably shouldn't be done. Now, here's my thing about the whole Scherzer Joe Girardi thing is that first of all, sports are very a mental game. I mean, obviously, you try and get inside the opposing team's head. It's the same way in any and in your own head. I mean, it's the same way like you look at hockey. Like for example, if somebody needs the energy, you drop the gloves. It's that kind of stuff that it's a very mental sport. I mean, look at the hack of Ben Simmons. Okay, you talk about getting inside somebody's head. The guy knows he can't shoot, and you're fouling him and sending him to the line. I mean, that's the ultimate getting inside somebody's head. Now, in my mind, if you're allowed and have if you can defend it, and I guess, Girardi was able to defend himself in terms of the reasoning for checking, why wouldn't you try and get inside the opposing pitcher's head and do a check mid inning? Now, I don't think it should be allowed at all, but if it is going to be allowed, people are going to use it for that very reason. And I don't see why they shouldn't. I mean, look, if I'm going to be allowed to do that and a pitcher's rolling, I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to get this guy off his game one way or another here. Now, obviously, it's Scherzer, it didn't work, but another pitcher, it may have. So again, it shouldn't be allowed and it should have to be, between inning checks. But if they're going to allow it, this is what's going to happen in my mind. I mean, that's just it is what it is. The bigger deal that I had with it is, the Nationals dugout is yelling at. This is more of a. This is my Phillies fan hat coming on. I try and avoid talking about them on the podcast because it's. I don't want to sound like a homer, but man, this team is just infuriating. I mean, Like they're down in this game to Scherzer, and they're yelling from the dugout at Girardi and stuff. He's getting called out, whatever. And the dugout for the Phillies could not look any more disinterested. Like the benches could have cleared, and I'm pretty sure it would have been Girardi, Hoskins versus the entire Nationals bench. Like I don't understand it. Like I don't understand where Bryce Harper was. I get it's his old team. I get all that, but it's that almost infuriated me more than anything that happened. I mean, this again, I guess we'll talk about the NL East down the road, but man, I mean, this team has no heart. I mean, it is brutal to watch. But yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, look, I get that Scherzer was mad about that, and rightfully so. But I mean, you're making yourself look more suspect by throwing a fit on the mound and pulling your pants down or whatever, like Sergio Romo almost did. Than just saying, "Hey, here's my hat, here's my glove, let's go." Like you're delaying the game more.
Yeah, I think the big point you made there is that these guys are all athletes. They're all going to be competitive. If there's a way that they can get some kind of minor advantage that'll lead their team to have a better chance at winning, they're going to take it. That's what Joe Girardi tried to do, and I commend him for it. It wasn't illegal to try and get a check on Max Scherzer to slow him down. There was no rule against it. It was technically part of the game because checks are becoming a bigger and bigger part of the game with all these rumors lying around. And I think if it was a guy like Madison Bumgarner pitching, if he was rolling at this point in his career, I think that that kind of strategy would have worked. I think if they had, if the opposing manager asked the umpire to check Madison Bumgarner, and if he could get away with it, I think it would have worked. I think he would have went off, and I think that would have given the other team a huge advantage. And that is a smart strategy. And now, what these umpires and what MLB commissioners are going to have to do, they're going to have to find a way against that if that keeps happening. I mean, obviously that was the first time it happened with Joe Girardi, but that was within the first week of this new checking rule for foreign substances. So this could obviously happen a lot more. And as this goes on, and it could become a problem, there's going to have to be some kind of defense against it because you're right, it's going to cause problems because pitchers it's all a mental game with your pitcher. If you're if you're in a rhythm, if you're just killing it in your own head right now, and if you're just killing it on the field, then anything that'll slow you down is going to hurt your momentum, and that's going to be a huge disadvantage for both yourself and your team. So you're going to have to everyone's going to have to find a way to just kind of fight against it. And I think that probably the best way to do it is just leave it at checks after at the end of every inning. You don't have to have checks in between every out if the inning's still going on, unless there's a legitimate reason for it. If he's if there's like this pattern that's causing the opposing umpire and the umpire himself to have concern that he's using a foreign substance, then he can check. But it shouldn't be something that happens it shouldn't be something that happens every inning, every half inning, something like that. There should be some kind of defense against it.
Yeah, I do think that they'll start to make it so that you can't really check in between innings. But yeah, I don't fault Girardi for that. It I mean it was just a complete clown show out there. What happened in Philadelphia with Scherzer acting the way he did, the entire Nationals bench and their hitting coach, who, by the way, I believe I think it was either their hitting or pitching coach who was calling out Girardi and stuff, and they had actually worked together for years. And as Girardi was his boss, so it was just a complete clown show. I mean, as we kind of suspected it would be enforcing this the way they have in the middle of a season. But I mean, let's hope that that's as bad as it gets, because that was, I mean, it was just a bad look for the league yesterday. I mean, in my mind, they could have waited till after this season to enforce this. I mean, look, a year of offense dropping down to bad levels, fine. It won't look as bad as the bad PR they're going to get if pitchers start getting injured, like Tyler Glasnow and some of those guys. So, yeah, I mean, in my mind, I think it should have waited till after the season. But now that they're doing it, hopefully, they'll work through these hiccups and start to get to a point here that it's just kind of a routine checkup during the game and not a big deal.
Yeah, you mentioned the Tyler Glasnow situation. He got a torn UCL, just trying to adjust his game with these new rules. And about 2 weeks ago, called out the MLB in a press conference, called out Rob Manfred for not waiting till at least the All-Star game, not waiting till the end of the season to enforce such a big change on these pitchers. But they wanted to get this done now. They wanted to get that offense level back to what it was in previous years, like 2018, 2019. So and now looking at Glasnow and the Rays, this is a huge loss for Tampa. The Rays just lost their big ace. He was a Cy Young contender at this point in the season. He was having a great year. And now the Rays lose him for probably the rest of the season, if not most of the season. And it's due to him trying to adjust his game with the new rule. But the Rays, they're currently in second place in the AL East. Chris, do you think the Rays can survive without Tyler Glasnow for now?
There we go. Well, what I was saying before I was muted, it's going to be tough. I think that they can, just because the Rays seem to just always find a way. I don't think that this Yankees team is good enough to catch them. So really, it comes down to them and the Red Sox, and that'll be tight. I know the Yankees have kind of gotten hot a bit, but it'll be really tight. I do think Wander Franco and the offense there uh, will help the pitching staff out and kind of give them more run support. But I don't know. I mean, you look at the rotation; it's not that impressive right now. The good news for Tampa is they have a great farm system, so I do think that they have the currency needed per se in top 100 prospects to trade for a good starter. But it's going to be tough. And Glass now, I haven't seen. I'm assuming he doesn't need Tommy John surgery since it's just partially torn. I don't know. I mean, if he needs Tommy John surgery, then he's out for a large part of next year too. So it's definitely a big loss. They'll stay in the mix for sure with the Yankees and Red Sox, but I expect them to make a big move at the deadline. And we'll go through at some point here our trade bait rankings here, see who they can get. I mean, not that I think, although I guess the Nats are kind of rolling now, but Max Scherzer was one of the top pitchers out there. But there's a bunch of pitchers that I would expect them to be in on at the deadline to help kind of replace Glass now.
Yeah, you mentioned one big piece for the Rays that they just got, Wander Franco, the top prospect in the game. He hit a home run in his first MLB game. He got one hit since then, hitting 200 right now. But you have to imagine he's going to be a big piece for the rest of the season if he does stay up for the rest of it. It's really going to be a battle between, I agree, the Rays and the Red Sox. The Yankees, they've been struggling to beat the Royals this week. I cannot trust the Yankees at all. Despite a guy like Luke Voigt coming back into the lineup, they would have to make a big trade in the rotation, possibly somewhere along the infield, maybe catcher, if they want to catch those two teams. And speaking of the Red Sox and Rays, there's actually a no-hitter going on right now. The Red Sox currently pitching a combined no-hitter through 7 against Tampa Bay. So we'll see what happens there. But the Rays always manage to find quality pitchers. They've just constantly found a way to develop these guys. Tyler Glasnow was one of them coming over in that, I believe it was the Pirates trade with Chris Archer, if I'm not mistaken. He was kind of a big piece of that Rays rotation for the past couple of years. Was supposed to be the ace this year, and he was until he got hurt. So we'll see how the Rays kind of move forward. But there are definitely some pieces that they can look at. Guys like Jose Berrios of the Twins could potentially be a guy to look at. And there are just a lot of teams that could be on their way to trading at the deadline, selling at the deadline. You take a look at a Herman Marquez from the Colorado Rockies, another big name that they could look at. There are a lot of interesting guys that the Rays could look at, but I think they should personally kind of stay the way they are. They are a much better team when they use like their opener strategy. They're kind of built through their bullpen. And I think they'll be fine until Tyler Glasnow does recover, which hopefully is before the playoffs.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see when Glasnow comes back, as you said. It is amazing though. Like Tampa's team, they have the sixth best team ERA with a 3.38. And if you just look at their starters, I mean, like their starters right now are Ryan Yarbrough, Rich Hill, Michael Waka, Josh Fleming, and Shane McClanahan, which, like, I mean, like, I guess that's fine, but like, you wouldn't expect them to be sixth in the league in ERA. Now, part of that is helped by the bullpen. I mean, the bullpen has been outstanding, but it is pretty crazy. I mean, when you look at this rotation, they're constantly able to get it done despite not really having an ace level starter, at least now that Tyler Glasnow is gone or hurt. And they don't have the big names that other teams have, but that's just the Rays way, really. Now, I do have to agree though that the Yankees are also going to have to make a move. It'll be interesting. But yeah, I think that it's Yankees kind of behind those two in terms of the Rays and Red Sox going forward.
Yeah, now moving on to another topic that just came out today, really. As we get closer to the middle of July and that All-Star weekend, the MLB recently announced their All-Star game jerseys and hats. And I got to say, Chris, we've talked about jerseys on most of these podcasts as the Citi Connect jerseys have kind of popped out. But I think that these All-Star jerseys are probably the worst of the bunch. And looking at specifically the Mets jerseys, it's just a plain white jersey with red lettering uh, by like the top right area, and I just like think it looks really bland. I mean, the hats are a completely different story. It's all black, purple star with the team logo. I think that's great. I think the purple mix as well, but I think the jerseys there's just too much white, specifically on these Mets jerseys here. I think they all have that white jersey, but Chris, what are your thoughts on these All-Star game jerseys?
Well, it's just terrible. Like, I mean, I feel bad saying it, but I almost kind of wonder if that the change in location kind of made them scramble to put the logo and everything together. But I don't know. Like I would have thought that they could have made these a lot better. In fact, with how cool kind of the Rocky Mountain landscape is and stuff, they could have done a lot better. One of a logo and two of incorporating that into the jerseys. Like I get that the purple star, I guess, is supposed to be like their way of incorporating the Colorado Rockies, but like I don't know. It just feels so plain to me. I mean, especially after seeing like most of the City Connect jerseys that have come out, these just feel like such a step back in my mind. I don't get all the red either. Like what's with the red everywhere? Like the Colorado Rockies aren't red, so it's not that. I'm not really sure. I guess it's Major League Baseball's logo is red and blue. I don't know. I don't get it. I mean, quite honestly, they would have been better off at this point just having the teams wear like their alternate uniforms or something to be fun. I mean, it's just unbelievable how plain these are. Like, I don't know. I would have liked to have seen them incorporate some cool designs to kind of go along with the location.
Yeah, and in my opinion, if the MLB really didn't have that much time to change their jerseys from the original plans, then they should have just let the players wear their team's jersey. I feel like that would have been so much better, and fans would have liked that a lot more than just these bland white jerseys with these random red colors. I mean, at first thought like maybe it was like the Braves colors because like it was the game was supposed to be in Atlanta, but you're trying to change it to Colorado, so that wouldn't really make too much sense. And you talk about not having enough time. I think the announcement was made like 2 months ago that the location of the All Star game be switching from Atlanta to Colorado. So I think 2 months, honestly, it's not a lot of time, but it's at least some time or enough time rather that these marketers or people who are designing these jerseys could come up with a semi decent plan than just having a bland white jersey with that lettering in red, which doesn't really make sense, doesn't really incorporate the city. And I think that they really should have just had alternate jerseys. I mean, if they could have just like gone with something like that, I feel like that fans would have loved it a lot more. Like even the players might have liked it a lot more too. Would have made it feel like you're representing your actual team more because you can't see the hat. I mean, the hat does have your team logo, but you can't see the hat. So I feel like the jersey, like from your actual team, would have made a lot more sense if they didn't have enough time.
Yeah, and I'm actually looking back right now at like the best all-star game designs of like recent years. And if you look at it, the 2018 one in, I believe it was 2018 in DC, again, they had the local flair. They had the Capitol building and the Washington Monument on the jerseys. In 2008, the Yankees had the I don't know what it is on top of their stadium. It looks like gates. I don't know what the actual name for it is called, but they're pretty iconic. And that's a good design. 2009 in St. Louis, they had the archway. 2010 in LA, or at least for the Angels Stadium there, they had the halos around kind of the A and N for American and National League. So they always kind of find a way to incorporate it. Again, here in Kansas City, they had the crown on the A and the N for the Kansas City Royals of the American and National League. Um, so it's just amazing how much of a miss this was. Like they barely incorporated the Colorado Rockies color or any style from that. They didn't incorporate anything from the landscape around there, like anything iconic. It's just completely missing any kind of distinction there. So it's just not great, quite honestly. I'm pretty surprised. I mean, they were on a roll with for the most part, outside of the Wrigleyville with the City Connect jerseys. So just kind of a step back here.
Yeah, and obviously the All Star Game won't be the only event that these jerseys are going to be worn in. The Home Run Derby getting closer as well happens the day before of the All Star Game, but I feel like the contestants, or at least the two that have been revealed so far, these haven't been misses, at least right now. Shohei Ohtani, one of the confirmed contestants on the Home Run Derby, is having a great season currently in a really interesting home run battle with a guy like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I feel like that's going to be a fun thing to look at down the line. He's only Otani is only one home run behind Vlad, so the fact that he's able to be in the home run derby definitely great for the sport. And then the other confirmed contestant is the reigning champion of the home run derby, Pete Alonso. Now I know Alonso's not having the best season in the world, but as a Mets fan, obviously great to see him there, and just seeing the reigning champ I feel like it'd be great to see as well. I mean, he did win it back in 2019. Only his 11 home runs, but remember, in 2019, Vlad Guerrero Jr. He was in the Derby, but he'd just been called up like 2 months ago and laid like 8 home runs. So this is pretty normal to see a guy with low home run totals in just for marketability. But Chris, that leaves 6 open spots left. Who are some potential contestants you would like to see in this year's home run derby?
Well, I got to go right now with the hottest man alive. I mean, he is literally just torching hot, Kyle Schwarber, who, by the way, I mean, if he continues at this rate, might catch Vlad Guerrero for the lead like within the next couple of weeks. I mean, or even sooner. Vlad is 24 now. Schwarber's up to 21. He is just red hot, like unstoppably hot right now. I believe he is 8 home runs, maybe 9 home runs in his last 7 games. I'd have to check, but he has just been absurd. I mean, most of the damage has come in the last month. Like he was not good in the month of April. He had 2 home runs and hit 206. Since then, I believe he has 17 home runs in the last now nearly 2 months. So he has been quite amazing. I absolutely think he should be in there. His power is crazy. And I believe he was in it back in DC in 2018. I was actually at that home run derby, which was really cool. And he put on quite a display. So I'd love to see him in it. Another guy I'd like to see possibly in it. It's a tough one, but this is kind of a name that a lot of people don't expect. But maybe a guy like Adam Duvall. I mean, he has a lot of power. He's never really hit for like a great average, but he has a lot of power. I would kind of like to see him in it. I mean, he's another one that constantly seems to have like multi-home run games. In fact, he's also hot right now. He would have won NL Player of the Week if it weren't for um, Schwarber. So he's another guy I think is kind of flying under the radar. I'd like to see in.
Yeah, I think both of those guys are great names, and especially the Kyle Schwarber pick, losing to Bryce Harper the last time he was in the home run derby. So a chance for him to get redemption, like Bryce Harper did when he won his home run derby. That was, I think, his second time in it. But for me, I want to get the obvious one out of the way first. Vlad Guerrero Jr. leading the league in home runs right now. He has to be in the home run derby. And for me, the big reason why is I want to see him play Pete Alonso again. I think everyone wants to see that rematch of 2019, that final round where Vlad was just really gassed, really tired from that semifinal matchup where it went into overtime. I believe it was against Matt Chapman. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they kept going neck and neck, and they kept going into overtime. And then when he played Pete Alonso, he was just too tired, and Alonso won. So seeing these two in the first round when they're both at full strength, I think would be a great thing to see to start at the home run derby. And for that, the way that the home run derby works is that they do the seeding based off home run totals. So there can't be anyone with a lower home run total than Pete Alonso right now because he would have to be the 8th seed. And of course, Vlad would have to beat out Shohei Ohtani for right now. So I think that would be the perfect start to a home run derby, just so we can see Vlad at full strength and 2 years better than he was before against the reigning champion Pete Alonso. And then just kind of looking around for other guys. I mean, you could have two Angels in there if you want to get Jared Walsh in there. He has had a great season, really kind of come out of nowhere season with the Angels this season, and putting up 18 home runs, hitting 292, and with Mike Trout just been hurt, with Mike Trout being hurt for the past month or so, he has been a huge breakout star for this Angels team in his third year. So I feel like seeing him would be a lot of fun as well.
Yeah, Jared Walsh has been crazy. Like that's the breakout in my mind, one of the breakout stories of the year. I mean, he's going to be turning 28 at the end of July. Like he's not young. In fact, Fangraphs had him as like the 28th ranked prospect at the end of 2020 with a 40 hit tool. So like he was not a big name prospect, but he kind of, I mean, looking back at his numbers, I mean, again, I haven't really watched him play a lot, but like looking back at his numbers, I don't really get why he wasn't ranked higher. Like 2019, he hit 36 home runs and 325 at AAA. Like I don't know if I were a GM and saw those numbers at AAA, I'd probably be calling him up like ASAP, especially the Angels who, they need the help to try and get, over the top there. But going back to the home run derby, I do think that since it's in Colorado, they're going to want to include a Rockies player in the home run derby. The clear choice for that would be Ryan McMahon with 16 homers. The only thing is actually his homers have kind of been, his power numbers have been down lately. He's still kind of coming back now. He's only hit 245 over the last month, but 300 over the last 7 games. I think he would be a good choice. Trevor Story would be kind of like the obvious choice, I guess, because it might be his last year in Colorado, and two, he's kind of the franchise player right now. Him and Charlie Blackmon after Arenado left, so it'll be interesting to see who gets chosen there out of Colorado. Trevor Story is probably having his worst year right now in his career, but it makes a lot of sense to put a Rockies player in the Derby.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like that would kind of help make it feel like Colorado's all-star game. I mean, the jerseys didn't do him justice. The hat kind of did him a little bit of justice, but if they were to have Ryan McMahon in the jersey in the Derby, I think that would be a big help. And he is the obvious choice. He has 16 home runs. None of the other Rockies players have over 11. I think the weird choice would be Charlie Blackmon. He only has 4 home runs, but he's the only Rockies player who's actually been in a home run derby before, but he lost in the first round. I forgot what year that was in. I think it was in the Miami one, but he didn't really have a long stay in the home run derby. And I think it would be really weird if they did put him in, but I think it would be McMahon who was the obvious choice. Trevor Story might get traded by the end of the by the end of July. CJ Crone hasn't really been in Colorado for a while. So I think if you want to get a guy who's been on the Rockies team for probably a while, he's been on the team for his entire career. I think Ryan McMahon is the obvious choice there.
Yeah, definitely. And it could be a good way to kind of showcase, I guess the future of the Rockies. I mean, if Trevor Story is going to move on, he's probably the guy that they're going to try and build around. I guess I'm not really quite sure of the direction of things out there in Colorado. But actually, there was a story that came out. I believe it was a couple days ago. Speaking of Colorado, their second GM. Well, I guess this time it was their assistant GM resigned from his post there, which comes after, I believe, at the beginning of the season or early in the season, their GM stepped down. So a lot of problems in the front office there in Colorado. I really hope that they can get things turned around. It is just a shame to watch in terms of the amount of high caliber players that they've had. We've talked about this plenty of times on the podcast before, but they just haven't had the pitching to really become an elite team. And then they haven't really had the front office stability either. So hopefully things will change around there, but definitely not a good season for them either, losing both their GM and assistant GM in a matter of months.
Yeah, and this is a Rockies team that's really been in a rough place ever since that Nolan Arenado trade, where it was clear to everyone in the room that they lost that deal. They gave away money to give away the one of the best third basemen in the game today, Nolan Arenado, and they've waited way too long on this Trevor Story trade. He's kind of lost a lot of value since he's having the worst year of his career, like you said. So not a lot going right for this Rockies team, and their record isn't where they want it to be. So we'll see. They should obviously sell, but we'll see if they end up doing that at the deadline because it is the Rockies and they're probably the most unpredictable team in the league right now. But going to some teams on the opposite side of the spectrum right now, two teams that are on insane hot streaks, starting out with the Houston Astros. They have won their last 10 straight games and they're winning right now 8-1 against the Tigers. So we'll call that 11 straight games. But Chris, they have had a relatively easy schedule to get those wins. The toughest series for them was a 4-game sweep over the White Sox. But looking at their upcoming schedule, they play the Tigers and the Orioles in the next two series. So this is a win streak that could go on for quite some time potentially.
Yeah, I agree. They do look really hot right now. It's going to be interesting to see though what happens moving forward. I mean, there's a couple of teams I think in that division that could take it. I mean, really, namely the A's. But I mean, the Astros and Athletics are, I mean, they're clearly the cream of the crop in that division. But if you look at just the run differential, what's interesting is that they have by far the biggest run differential in the league at 135. The offense is just clicking. I mean, say whatever you want about, the whole scandal of the trash cans and stuff. They clearly don't care at this point. They've moved on and are playing phenomenal baseball. And I think that, as much as people want to continue to ridicule them and, maybe they deserve it, maybe they don't, I don't know. But people should also be taking this team seriously. I mean, what they're doing is huge. I mean, they're putting up big numbers. I mean, you look at a guy like Jordan Alvarez, Yuli Gurriel are hitting just nukes. 11 and 10 home runs, both hitting over 300. Jose Altuve, 17 home runs. I mean, talk about a guy that could be in the home run derby. He could be. And even Carlos Correa, 14 home runs. So the power numbers are up there despite Alex Bregman not exactly having a great season. And same with, who else was it that I was thinking of? It isn't having a great season. Actually, Michael Brantley, despite not hitting for a lot of power, is hitting over 350. So they have a great lineup, and I think the one question mark for me going into the season for the Astros was the pitching. And again, they've kind of had a lot of young prospects that have stepped up and took over. Luis Garcia has been great. Framber Valdez has been great. Jose Urquidy has been great. Zach Greinke has been pretty good as well. So, I mean, they've been good. They've gotten a lot of consistent starts out of some of their young players, in addition to Zach Greinke, and now actually Odorizzi has kind of come around as well. So they look like a really good team to me. I mean, they'll definitely get into the playoffs, but right now they look like they could win the division even over the A's.
Yeah, and that lineup for the Astros has looked insanely good, and they're a great hit for contact team. A lot of the guys who we've seen hit for power in past seasons, it just hasn't come around recently. But all those guys they've hit for a really good average. I mean, talk about a guy like Alex Bregman only has having 7 home runs, but he's still hitting 275, which is an above average season for most players. Jordan Alvarez, 11 home runs, still hitting over 300. And the two guys who aren't supposed to have the most power on the team in Jose Altuve, Carlos Correa, they lead the team in that category. And Jose Altuve has always been that hit for contact type guy. He has 17 home runs. And this is great for Carlos Correa. You talk about a year where the upcoming free agent shortstops, they are struggling. And we talked about Trevor Story a while ago. He isn't having a great season. Javier Baez is home run or strikeout right now at this point, and Lindor already got signed. He got signed before the season. So the fact that Carlos Correa is hitting 14 home runs, a 306 batting average, this is great for this offseason where he could be getting a lot of money from either the Astros or another team. And this is an Astros team at the start of the year that didn't have George Springer. They didn't have their leadoff guy coming back into that lineup, and they have managed to find a way to live without him, which has definitely been great for Houston. And it's really just a two-team race right now in that AL West between them and the Oakland A's. But this winning streak put them right over the A's for that first place spot in the division. So this has been huge for them. And their pitching's come around as well. I mean, Roberto Ozuna, he isn't the closer in Houston anymore. But Ryan Presley, he has an ERA under 2, and he's 11 saves right now. So he has been anchoring a very strong bullpen to this point. So if the Astros, excuse me, can trade for maybe a potential power bat in the middle of their lineup at the deadline, I think they'll be unstoppable.
Yeah, they might do that. I actually am more inclined to think that they're going to go for starting pitching. Um, Now the farm system there is not great, I don't think, so they don't have like a lot to trade from. But I think because they do have a couple young guys in the rotation who have pitched very well, but in the playoffs, I guess sometimes you do want some more veteran presence. Guys who have been in the playoffs and done it before. Um, I do tend to think that that's what they're going to trade for. Also, bullpen help. Their bullpen, I don't believe, has been very good either. So I think those are the two things that they'll really, besides Ryan Presley in closer, he's been very good. But other than that, they've been kind of shaky. So I think that's kind of what they'll lean more towards. But I wouldn't be surprised for them to go after a power bat. I mean, that lineup is already that good. Um, Meanwhile, though, there are a couple of other teams that are just scorching hot right now. So what are some of the other teams that have caught your eye?
Yeah, Chris, and I think the other big winning streak that's going around, hopping over to the National League here, the San Diego Padres. They've won their last 7 straight games, and that only includes a sweep over to the division rival Dodgers, and that came in convincing fashion as well. They got a lot of really good wins there at home in San Diego, and there's a good chance that winning streak could continue since they stay at home to host the struggling Diamondbacks. But this Padres team, we've talked about in the past, it's just extremely well rounded, extremely well rounded. And another guy we could see in the home run derby, Fernando Tatis Jr., leading that team with 22 home runs on the year. That entire lineup's kind of struggled to this point power wise, as no one else really has, and no one else has a higher home run total than 13 on the team. Manny Machado has 12. But this pitching staff has been what has kind of dominated with this team. Joe Musgrove had a career resurgence this year. Threw the no hitter earlier this year, has a 2.22 ERA. Definitely could be wearing that plain white jersey in the All Star game. Yu Darvish been anchoring this staff with a 2.5 ERA as well. So with those being the top 2 guys on the staff, that is great news for a Padres team potentially making the playoffs here. If you have a strong top 3 in that rotation, obviously I want to include Blake Snell to that because he was the big piece that was brought over from Tampa Bay. He has struggled, but I feel like if you were to put him in a situation, a playoff situation, he would still find a way to flourish. But definitely still great that they can rely on guys like Yu Darvish and Joe Musgrove in those playoff games. But that lineup, they've been struggling to this point, which is very weird. Why they've been on this winning streak. I mean, Jake Cronenworth's had a great year, hitting over 280, but guys like Manny Machado, Eric Hosmer, Tommy Pham, they have hit under 260 to this point. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Padres do at the trade deadline, because they are still in third place despite this winning streak in a very stacked NL West division. So a lot of places they could improve at the trade deadline. They could add another offensive bat if they wanted to boost the back end of the rotation. I think they could. Mark Melancon's kind of held down that bullpen as well. So a lot of areas this Padres team could improve, but definitely promising that they have gone on this 7-game winning streak and beat the Dodgers in the process.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I think the NL West is going to be I mean, I think NL West and AL East are going to be a complete arms race of stocking up everything at the deadline. I mean, I expect that's where the majority of the moves are going to come from. When you look at LA and San Diego, they both, at least LA has that farm system depth. San Diego has definitely done a number on it through trades, especially the last year or so. Still do have some pretty big name guys. You know, CJ Abrams to me is another guy that I think could get moved to top 100 prospect, because now, you know, they do have the infield set for the future with Machado and Tatis. So that could be a guy that goes. Um, but just in general, they have, you know, players that can be traded in terms of prospects. So that's why I think that they're going to stock up, because if you look at it, nobody from the ALE or from the NL East is going to get the wild card spot. Like the NL East is horrible. The Mets, I'll say it right now, if the Mets, I would put my bank account on it, are going to win the division this year. Like it shouldn't be close either. I don't see anybody challenging them. In fact, I don't see anybody in the NL East being that far above 500 and challenging for a wild card spot. Now, NL Central, I mean, yeah, one of those teams will get in because they have to win it in Milwaukee or Chicago, but I don't see the other of those two teams winning the wild card. So that leaves San Fran, LA, and San Diego getting the other three spots via the division crown and the two wild card spots. So, you know, I do think that all three of those teams, LA, San Diego, and San Francisco, are going to be piling up the position players, arms, you name it, at the deadline to win that division, because nobody wants to be left in the spot where they have to go into that 1-game wild card, even if they're, you know, a 95 win team. That's horrible, you know. So, but to me, San Diego, how hot they've been, maybe their lineup is starting to come together. You know, Machado was not good. He goes through long cold spells, and he did again this year. The first 2 months of the season, he was hitting under 240, only 6 home runs. Now in the month of June, he's hit 6 homers and is hitting 316 this month. And then of course Jake the Rake is back. Cronenworth has been on fire. So and then Tatis is healthy now. So those three have been hitting really well. They're going to have to add something at the deadline, though, position wise. I'm not sure what that is. I mean, Trent Grisham is hit or miss. At sometimes he looks really hot and, you know, like one of the better outfielders in the game with the bat. Yeah, but now he's really slumping. Will Myers and Tommy Pham, I don't know if they're the answer either. So I think the outfield spots will be the most vulnerable for, you know, a replacement. Then for them, hopefully behind the plate for catching, they'll get Austin Nola back. He has not really been healthy at all this year, but put up big numbers, or at least decent numbers, the last 2 years behind the dish for Seattle and then San Diego. So they're definitely going to have to upgrade the lineup, San Diego, to stay in the mix for the division crown, in my mind. But I do think they're a solid playoff contender. Maybe not a lock, but close.
Yeah, you talk about the Padres outfield. You mentioned Trent Grisham. I think, I'll bring up MLB The Show. This is going to be the one time this episode I bring up MLB The Show. But there was a Twitter post that showed that someone matched up against the actual Trent Grisham. And all these MLB players, they have a 99 overall version of themselves to play on Diamond Dynasty with. But Trent Grisham with himself was hitting like 205, 206 with his actual player, which I think just kind of shows that even the real life Trent Grisham can't get the video game Trent Grisham to get a hit, which just shows how underwhelming he's been so far this season.
Yeah, he's he's kind of I guess a good sign of what that offense has been, streaky. I mean, when they're hot, they are red hot, and when they're cold, I mean, they are just ice cold. And I mean, he's been the same way, he's hitting 128 over his last 12 games. So not great, not great to say the least. But again, luckily they have three guys carrying that lineup right now. But that is going to be what they have to upgrade at. Not really the starting pitching. It's going to be the bullpen there to get somebody to hand the ball to Melanson, and then the lineup most likely in the outfield there for the Padres. Now, I do want to highlight another team that's red hot in the National League, and that is the Nationals. Washington, for better or worse, has been dragged back into relevancy by Kyle Schwarber, who we talked about earlier is just scalding hot. Like, I mean, ridiculously hot. And they're doing this with Juan Soto not really being that impressive. I mean, he's racked up the doubles and singles, but he hasn't hit really the long ball this year as we're accustomed to with Juan Soto. So it'll be interesting to see what they do at the lineup, because they do hold one of the bigger trading pieces in Max Scherzer. I mean, Max Scherzer is arguably the best pitcher on the market if they're going to put him up for sale. I mean, not only that, but then I would assume that Kyle Schwarber would be up for sale, since I think he's only on a 1 or 2 year deal. So they're kind of a team that, I don't want to say holds the trade market hostage, but they do have some good trading chips, and now seem like maybe they're going to go after the playoffs again.
Yeah, and this 4 game winning streak has been solely due to Kyle Schwarber. Ever since Davey Martinez kind of moved him back up into that leadoff spot, he has been raking home runs after home runs, just destroying both of our teams, the Mets and the Phillies, as he now has 21 home runs on the season. And yeah, Max Scherzer was in a lot of in a lot of trade scenarios at the deadline, because it wasn't too long ago where the Nationals were in last place in their own division, and now they're back up to second. And this NL East is bad enough to the point where the Nationals and really any team besides Miami, they're all contenders. Like, they all can make a run to win the NL East, despite your opinions on the Phillies, Chris. But I think that the Nationals, they're still in a good spot, especially after beating the Mets in in that 4 game series recently. They won that 3 games to 1. It was due to Kyle Schwarber, yes, but there's going to be a time where Juan Soto and Trey Turner are going to wake up. It won't be just the Kyle Schwarber show, and then Kyle Schwarber's going to slow down as well. But I think it's been a good sign for the Nationals that the pitching rotation has kind of come back to life a little bit in terms like Patrick Corbin. He isn't horrendous anymore, where he isn't getting taken out of games after the second inning. We're not checking up on how many runs he's given up in a first inning during a live podcast. So I think that the fact that he's been at least somewhat decent has kind of been a huge help. Max Scherzer's getting back to that Cy Young form. Even Joe Ross has had a decent year. ERA just over 4, but it's been getting better each start. So if Steven Strasburg ever does get back on the field for the Nationals, that should help out the team as well. So they're in a decent spot. I think that right now they're in a position where they can hold on to Max Scherzer and kind of go after that one last run. And it's a risk. They held on to Bryce Harper in his last year. They could have gotten a lot of value from a team like the Dodgers, but they held on to him. They missed the playoffs and then watched him go to the Phillies for nothing in that free agency. So it's really a big risk when you talk about holding on to these star players. You don't want to get nothing like you did for Bryce Harper, where you know you can get a lot. And Max Scherzer does have a lot of value. He's going to be the top pitcher on this free agent market. So he could get a lot of trade value despite his age. And the Mets, they're not too far from the Mets right now. They're only 4 games back. So I think that by that last week of July, if the Nationals are 7 or so games back of first place, then I think they should trade Max Scherzer. But if they're where they are right now, if they're 4 games back in a very weak division, I think that they're better off holding on to Max Scherzer and just going on one last ride.
I kind of think that that's what they're going to do. I mean, because the only thing is though is again, looking at the farm system, they might honestly have less than the Phillies in terms of like trading chips. Like Cade Cavalli is the future of that rotation in my mind. He has looked dynamite so far in I think it was Frederick or no, he was in Williamsport. He was in Wilmington in high A and then in double A so far in Harrisburg has looked very good. Other than that, and he's a top 100 prospect, some would even say top 50. They probably don't want to trade him. Other than that, I don't know if anything that they have would get them, a solid guy that could really contribute to this team. It'll be interesting. I really have no idea what they're going to do at the trade line or trade deadline because again, they don't have really the pieces that they can move to get a big name, but they're also still in it. So it's like I don't know why they would want to trade Scherzer, Schwarber, any of them. So the interesting thing also with Soto is I got to look into his launch angle a little bit on Statcast, but I think that kind of seems to be his problem. Like the more I watch of him, like he's still smoking baseballs. He's just smoking them on the ground and on a line instead of getting the ball elevated, which is interesting. He's also the other thing I've been watching him a lot lately to kind of try and figure out what's going on there. I think he's hitting like 275, 280, which is good. But again, it's not what we expect from him. He's still getting on base a ton, but he's almost too patient at the plate. Like I've watched him get struck out and take a lot of strikes like on the edge of the plate that it's just like, okay, like you need to swing at those with 2 strikes. Like I know it may not be like it might be like a centimeter off the zone. And Soto has the perfect strike zone recognition, but I almost think it hurts him with 2 strikes because he kind of becomes under aggressive. That's the thing I've noticed about him this year is he's just not aggressive enough. Like whereas before I think he was the perfect amount of aggressive in terms of drawing walks and not chasing, but still getting pitches on the edge of the zone. Now he's not. So that's just kind of what I've noticed with him. But again, I do think he'll turn it on here in the second half of the season. And I do expect Washington to be buyers. I mean, they've been pretty impressive, going through all that they've gone through, all the turmoil of guys getting hurt, everything. It seemed to rally them the other day, too, when they had the Girardi ejection and then their GM, who was it, Mike Rizzo, made the comment that I think, well, he made a comment about Girardi being a con artist, and then he then apologized for it the next day, saying he has like the most respect for Girardi, and it's like, okay, buddy, like we all know Manfred contacted you and said you better apologize for this or else you're going to get fined. Like, come on, that was just completely unnecessary. But yeah, I think Washington will be competitive here now down the stretch, unbelievably, but I think they will be.
Yeah, it's kind of reminiscent to that 2019 season. Everyone kind of counted them out at a certain point around this range, around June, July. But then they had that spark and just kind of went all the way to the World Series, rode that run to the World Series. And we'll see if it happens again. Right now, they've already climbed up from fifth to second. We'll see if they pass the Mets eventually. And despite Juan Soto's lack of aggression, like you said, still hitting 278. So we're just seeing that if he's able to turn it on like we know he can, then he'll be able to help this Nationals team get to where they want to be. And we'll see if obviously Kyle Schwarber can keep up that pace that he's currently on right now. Obviously, he's not going to keep that up for the entire season. We'll see how long he kind of ride that wave till. So now the way I want to finish out this podcast and the way we've kind of what we've kind of alluded to these past couple podcasts here, we have top prospects at the ballpark. And obviously, looking around here, neither of us are at a ballpark right now. So this is actually going to be recorded tomorrow and attached to this podcast. But both Chris and I and a few special guests as well will be heading over to Citi Field, the home of the New York Mets, to watch them take on the Philadelphia Phillies. We'll all be in attendance there. and we will get a live top prospect segment from Citi Field. Chris and I from our seats, potentially a few guests as well. So enjoy, guys. That is going to be the way this podcast is going to end. We'll attach that on the end of this video. But for current Chris Lemmo and current Logan Bourandas, that is going to be it from us. Future us will close it out, but have a great rest of your day.
All right, welcome back to Top Prospects here. As Logan told you, we've teleported from my attic there in the recording studios now to Citi Field after Game 1. Phillies, of course, lose it 2-1 in extras. Let's go to Logan for the thoughts.
Yeah, so I also transported from my basement over to Citi Field here. Not a lot of hitting here in Game 1, and it looked really bad up until that last out. Francisco Lindor got the jersey out right here. I'm repping the same jersey I wore yesterday here. Unable to tie the game. Dominic Smith ended up bringing them home, but great start for the Mets here. I know it hurts for you, Chris, but still a whole other 7-inning ball game here, Game 2.
Yeah, another good performance by Taijuan Walker, starting for the Mets. His rotation continues to get the job done. Mets had a chance, I think it was bottom of the 6th, to get it done. Had bases loaded, but Alvarado got me out. He came in the next inning and didn't get it done, and they bring in Suarez. He just couldn't get it done either against Lindor. Got a key base hit, almost had a home run in the corner in left field, not far from where we're sitting. But it was exciting. Looked for a while like the Mets weren't going to hit today. But they got it done when it really counted. And you can always kind of count on that when the Phillies bring out their bullpen. So that's pretty much the story today.
Yeah, the bullpen, another atrocious showing, really, after Aaron Nola. He had 10 strikeouts in a row, tying Seaver's record. Waste of a great outing again. But I mean, for the Phillies now, 6 back. I personally think it's time to sell. I think the Mets have the division. It's going to be hard for them to come back. I don't know what you're thinking about that.
Chris, I think that is really bold, especially with the way the Mets, their bullpen's not the best as well, and the Mets, they have a really division-heavy schedule these next couple of weeks here, and they play the Phillies a lot more, and they play every team a lot more. I mean, look at the Nationals going from 5th place to 2nd place in a span of like a couple of days here, so I wouldn't count the Phillies at all, especially with Aaron Nola putting up a great performance. They were looking for that hit for quite some time there. Getting 10 strikeouts to tie Tom Seaver's record, definitely a highlight of the game that kind of went wasted there. But if they can fix that bullpen, maybe get a piece like that at the deadline, I think they'll be okay. They can try and compete there for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I agree with Logan. You got to pump the brakes a little bit on that, just because the Mets do have a rough schedule from now until the All-Star break. A couple weeks without another day off, playing division rivals like the Phillies and others. That's a chance for the Mets to pull away, yes. And after this stretch, you might have an idea of whether or not the Mets are just going to run away from the division. But it's also an opportunity for teams to get closer. The Mets keep having injuries. Guys keep coming back. Guys keep getting hurt. So they're still a little bit vulnerable. After the All-Star break, I understand if you want to sell because the Mets have a pretty good stretch. Pirates after the All-Star break and right before the All-Star break. So at that point, then you're looking to sell. But I think there's still time for the division rivals such as the Phillies to maybe close the gap a little bit.
All right, quick predictions here for Game 2. It's been a rough week in Philly sports between the Sixers and the Phillies. I know Matt Moore's on the mound, but I feel like we're due for something to happen this year. I'm going to go Phillies winning Game 2.
Yeah, I think the Phillies as well. I think that Matt Moore, David Peterson, both not the best pitchers in the world. I think we can definitely see both sides into the bullpen by the 3rd inning. I feel like it's going to be, this game was 2-1 in Game 1. I think we can see the 11-10 Phillies win, so I'm going to go Phillies Game 2.
Yeah, so Logan thinks to bet the over. I'm going to agree. We just don't have great pitching going for the Mets tonight. Peterson's been really up and down. And the Phillies Moore isn't exactly known as a stud. So we could see the bullpens out early. And I think the Phillies are probably going to be upset with how they play in that Game 1 comeback a little bit. I think the Mets against that bullpen will have a chance to come back and make it close. I think the Phillies will surprisingly be able to pull away with this one in the end.
That'll wrap it up here for a special edition of Top Prospects Live at Citi Field. Logan Bourandas and our special guest, Jeremy Ganes. Also a shout out to our favorite cameraman on the kickoff. We'll see you next time on Top Prospects.
Thank you for watching this edition of Penn State Sports Night. If you're a fan of our content, please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more clips. Also, follow us on Twitter at PSSN TV and on Instagram at PSU Sports Night to keep up with all the action. For For all my colleagues, we are Penn State Sports Night.